in underwater techniques, trained to use a range of automatic weapons. And they greatly favor the easily concealed Heckler & Koch submachine guns. One A-team member is always an expert with a wide variety of explosives. And all must have parachute skills, so training is concentrated and rigorous. At Fort Benning, Georgia, Rangers on the drops from 80-meter towers on which all special forces must practice. Unlike some special forces, they like to show off their methods and equipment, seeing some advantage in the publicity as a deterrent to the enemies they may face. Every detail is taken care of, including how to cope with a chute blown along by the wind. But their speciality is halo, high-altitude, low-opening parachuting. Men in oxygen masks leave their plane at up to 7,000 meters, but don't open the canopy until the last possible moment. It makes for swift and, above all, silent operations. Using special directional chutes, they can guide themselves onto targets with pinpoint accuracy. Fully trained special operations forces take part in frequent exercises aimed at both behind the lines and anti-terrorist action. Helicopters make rapid insertion possible even at night. The team's objective may be sabotage of a vital enemy installation, in this case a power station. Men plant packs of timed explosives. Here, the exercise target was the leader of a terrorist cell. The captive can be extracted quickly. Their operation may involve diversionary action, leading to the speedy rescue of hostages. This was the objective of America's famous Delta Force, modelled closely on Britain's SAS, when set the task of rescuing the hostages held after students stormed the United States Embassy in Iran. The Munich Olympics massacre, when Arab terrorists killed 11 Israeli athletes, was among several terrorist incidents in the 1970s. One effect was that American politicians, alarmed by the threat of worldwide terrorism, authorized the formation of Delta Force. The brainchild of US Army Colonel Charles Beckwith, it soon became known as Charlie's Angels.
In 1976, the United States Army undertook a study to determine what should be done to combat terrorism overseas in the event something were to happen to one of our posts or one of our installations. I was asked to be a part of that study, and one of the recommendations that we made as a part of the study was to weld together counter-terror capability along the lines of the British Special Air Service concept.
Based at Fayetteville, in the shadow of the statue of the 18th century French General Lafayette, Delta Force follows SAS training patterns. With the emphasis firmly on counter-terrorism, Delta is divided into squadrons, each subdivided into troops of 16 men, operating in units as small as 2. Close to Delta's second birthday, the Islamic Revolution in Iran saw the seizure of the United States Embassy, and the parading as hostages of the 53 occupants. So soon after that of the Vietnam War, the daily humiliation prompted a Special Forces operation to free the hostages.
Being very frank about it, I thought this was just an update. I had no idea that President Carter would make the decision that he made. In fact, I almost fell out of my chair.
Operation Eagle Claw, however, was fundamentally flawed by complexity. It required helicopters to fly from the aircraft carrier Nimitz to a remote spot codenamed Desert One. Transports would fly in to refuel them for the leg to Tehran, where Delta Force would free the hostages and helicopter them to a remote airstrip, where waiting starlifters would take them to Mazaira Island. The first two Hercules transports flew over southern Iran. Crews constantly checked for signs of an Iranian alert, but there were no hitches. Behind them, 4 other Hercules carried kerosene to refuel the 8 helicopters carrying Delta Force. All reached their desert rendezvous on time. Catastrophe followed swiftly and almost inevitably. A helicopter attempting refueling in a severe dust storm blundered into the Hercules tanker, causing an almighty explosion and fire. 8 men died as fire consumed both the helicopter and the Hercules. 3 other helicopters had already aborted during earlier dust storms, and there were now too few to effect the mission. Still 265 miles from their objective, the mission was abandoned.
In the desert, I said, you know, I'm carrying this whole country. And this particular operation is beginning to unravel, and it's beginning to go sour. And and I'm a part of this. We're going to embarrass our country. I knew that if we didn't make it, it was because of the helicopters, because of the pilots, because of the machines. I didn't know, but I knew that was the weak link in the chain. If you would ask me, would I do it again, I'd say not with that machine. And I'd want some pilots who were old boys who wanted to fly those machines, and if necessary, they'd carry them on their backs.
It was an embarrassing failure, blamed also on muddled command systems, designed more to satisfy inter-service rivalries than expedite the mission. Similar problems bedeviled Operation Urgent Fury, the 1983 invasion of the Caribbean island of Grenada to overturn a Marxist coup. As Marines landed at Pearl's airport in the north, Special Forces and Rangers targeted a suspected Cuban stronghold at Calvini after landing near the new Point Saline airfield. It was this Cuban-built airport that sparked the invasion to depose a left-wing group that had seized power and murdered the elected Prime Minister. Its particular pretext for invading what was a British protectorate was the presence there of several hundred United States students. America was determined to oppose the spread of left-wing government so close to its own back door. But this should have been a neater war. Instead, it proved that many military lessons remained to be learned. Marines in the north were unable to communicate with the Special Forces men to the south because they worked on incompatible radio frequencies. Intelligence was little better. One Marines officer complained 90% of his information came from the British Broadcasting Corporation. Marines artillery engages a Cuban strongpoint beyond the hill. Airstrikes from the command ship USS Guam were also called in. Their target, Calvini Barracks, thought to be housing 600 men. In fact, the area was deserted. Such failures of intelligence and communications ensured that it took days instead of hours to mop up resistance. The painful truth was that despite extremely detailed planning, different army groups were not told of each other's orders and therefore had no idea of how to coordinate their operations. For the world's most powerful army, it was an inefficient campaign. One casualty of poor intelligence was a hospital, hit because the landing force had only a tourist map of the island. and instead of capturing 11,000 Cubans, fewer than 800 were found. But Special Forces psychological warfare units kept up the pressure even when the fighting was over.
Little brother Cuba, tie up Grenada, then Tara by administrative sector. Interrogation, assassination, that is why Grenada singing God Bless America. Tell the Russians we are making jokes. Communism for us can work. We the people of the Caribbean are used to freedom. Absolutely, are used to freedom. Absolutely.
Psychological operations create a favorable image, gain popular support, and weaken enemy forces. PSYOP is now a major weapon in 20th century warfare.
Mercenaries, soldiers of fortune. Hannibal defeated the Romans with mercenaries, but in modern times they're best remembered for their operations in the Congo. Elizabethville, 1960. Civil war hits the capital of the Congo's richest province, Katanga. Just independent, the Congo had no standing army. It had been disbanded by its colonial rulers, Belgium, following a mutiny. Now tribe battled tribe for ultimate power, and in Katanga, African volunteers fought and defeated mercenaries hired by the local ruler, who tried to declare unilateral independence. Defeated then, Moshe Chombe would fight back. Chombe eventually took power in Leopoldville 3 years later. When a Soviet-backed uprising in Stanleyville threatened to topple him, he turned again to mercenaries, this time to put down the rebellion. The first mercenaries were Belgian or French, boosted by men recruited in South Africa. Informal recruitment at a remote airstrip in the bush preceded equally informal fitness training. Most mercenaries were already physically toughened by fighting in other colonial wars. The assault on Stanleyville was prompted by a Simba uprising, trapping 1,800 Europeans. This mercenary army was the most disciplined, divided into commandos by its leader, the British major known as Mad Mike Hoare. Little of the fighting took the form of set-piece battles. Most of it was skirmishing by infantry with little heavy weapon backup. But their past experience in national armies and superior firepower gave them a distinct edge over their opposition. Prisoners were shown few comforts. Far happier to see the mercenaries were the refugees from the uprising,